I had always thought I knew myself. I had my life carefully mapped out: wake up early, go to work, come home, meet friends on the weekends, maybe go on a casual date if I felt like it. Nothing too complicated, nothing too messy. Love wasn't something I chased, and passion was something I had learned to file away under dangerous distractions. Men came and went, none of them leaving a mark deep enough to matter. I thought I was fine with that. Safe, even. And then she walked in. Her name was Arya. She wasn't supposed to change my life. She was just a friend of a friend, someone I met one casual evening at a cozy cafe downtown. But the moment my eyes landed on her, I felt something shift. Arya wasn't the kind of woman who screamed for attention, yet people noticed her without trying. She had this quiet confidence, like she didn't need to prove herself to anyone. Her hair tumbled in dark waves over her shoulders, and when she laughed, her whole face softened, like she was letting you in on a secret. When our mutual friend introduced us, it was nothing more than a handshake, a smile, the kind of polite exchange you forget in an hour. Except I didn't forget. When her fingers brushed against mine, a current shot up my arm. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I told myself it was nothing. She was just striking, that was all. Maybe I admired her confidence, her energy. But as the evening went on, I found myself drawn to her. Every time she tilted her head while listening, I wanted to know what she was thinking. Every time her eyes flicked toward me, holding my gaze for a second too long, my stomach tightened. It was terrifying. And thrilling. I had never thought of women that way. Or maybe I had little moments in the past, glances that lingered too long, feelings I buried before they grew roots. But Arya made it impossible to bury anything. She had this presence that demanded honesty, even if you didn't speak it aloud. When we finally parted ways that night, I walked home with my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I replayed her smile in my head, the way her voice wrapped around words like silk, low, and teasing. Lying in bed, I kept trying to convince myself it was nothing. Just admiration. Just a passing curiosity. But I knew better. Something had been awakened in me. Something I couldn't explain, something I wasn't ready to face, but couldn't ignore. I never expected to fall for her. And yet, I could already feel myself slipping. The second time I saw Arya, it wasn't planned. Our mutual friend invited me to a small dinner gathering at her apartment. I almost said no, work had drained me that day, but when I arrived and saw Arya sitting cross-legged on the couch with a glass of red wine in her hand, I silently thanked myself for coming. She looked up at me with that easy smile of hers, and I felt my chest tighten. "Hey, stranger," she said, like we were already friends, like she'd been expecting me. "Hey," I managed, suddenly aware of how awkward my hands felt at my sides. As the night went on, conversation flowed around us, people laughing, telling stories, arguing about which movie deserved to be called a classic. But somehow, Arya and I kept drifting closer as though pulled by some invisible thread. By the end of the evening, we were sitting shoulder to shoulder on the couch, our knees brushing lightly every time one of us shifted. "So, what do you do when you're not working?" she asked, her gaze steady, curious. I laughed. "Mostly survive. Read a little, write when I can. I'm not that exciting." Her lips curved into a half smile. "I don't believe that for a second. You look like someone with secrets." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. No one had ever said that to me before. People usually took me at face value, responsible, quiet, predictable. But the way Arya looked at me, it was like she saw through the mask I didn't even realize I wore. We talked until long after the others had started cleaning up. Every exchange felt effortless, like we'd known each other longer than a couple of meetings. She teased me gently, but not cruelly. She listened intently, as though every word I said mattered. By the time I got home that night, I knew I was in trouble. I couldn't stop thinking about the way her hand had brushed mine when she passed me her glass, or the warmth that lingered when her knee pressed against mine. I couldn't ignore the way my heart had sped up when she leaned in close to hear me over the noise, her breath brushing my cheek. The lines of friendship and something more had already begun to blur, and though I told myself I shouldn't, a part of me didn't want to stop it. That night in bed, I caught myself wondering what her lips might taste like. The thought startled me, but instead of pushing it away, I lingered on it, letting the image play out in my mind. I wasn't ready to admit it to anyone, not even to myself fully, but something undeniable was happening. And I had a feeling Arya knew it too. The third time we saw each other, it was just the two of us. Arya had texted me out of the blue. She'd somehow gotten my number from our mutual friend. Coffee? I need an excuse to leave my apartment before I lose my mind. I smiled at my phone longer than I should have before typing back, sure. I could use caffeine. We met at a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and warm lighting that made everything feel a little softer. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a notebook open in front of her. When she saw me, her face lit up in a way that made me feel like she'd been waiting for me all day. Hey, she said, standing to hug me. I froze for half a second before sinking into her arms. She smelled like vanilla and something faintly floral. The hug lasted just a beat too long, and when we pulled back, her hands lingered lightly on my arms. We talked for hours. About books, music, dreams we hadn't told anyone else. I found myself telling her things I'd never admitted to anyone, like how I sometimes felt like I was living a life I hadn't actually chosen, like I'd just gone along with what was expected of me. She listened without judgment, her gaze locked on mine, her expression soft. You deserve to live a life that feels like yours, she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. Not one that someone else designed for you. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had to look down at my coffee to hide the way my eyes stung. No one had ever said something like that to me before. As the afternoon slipped into evening, the cafe emptied out around us. We were so caught up in our little bubble that I didn't notice until the barista politely reminded us they were closing. We stepped out into the cool night air, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Walk you home, she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Our apartments weren't far apart, and the streets were quiet. As we walked side by side, our hands brushed occasionally. The first time, I thought it was an accident. The second time, I wondered if it wasn't. The third time, I let my fingers linger just a little longer before pulling away. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was charged, humming with something unspoken. When we finally reached my building, I didn't want the night to end. She looked at me, her eyes glinting in the dim streetlight. I had a really good time, she said softly. Me too, I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. For a second, I thought she might kiss me. She leaned in ever so slightly, her breath warm against my cheek. My heart raced, every nerve in my body alive with anticipation. But then she pulled back, offering me a small, knowing smile. Good night. And just like that, she was gone, leaving me standing there with my pulse still racing and my lips tingling with a kiss that hadn't happened. After that night, things shifted between us. We didn't say it out loud, but the air buzzed every time we were near each other. Messages turned into late-night conversations. Casual coffees became hours that slipped by unnoticed. I told myself we were just friends, but my heart betrayed me every time I saw her name light up my phone. One Friday evening, she invited me over. I made too much pasta, she texted. Come help me eat it, or I'll be stuck with leftovers all week. When I arrived, her apartment smelled of garlic and fresh basil. She was barefoot, wearing an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder. My chest tightened at the sight, and I had to force myself to act normal. Dinner was simple but perfect: red wine, pasta, laughter echoing through her small kitchen. But it wasn't the food that made my pulse race, it was her. The way she leaned across the table, her fingers brushing mine as she passed me the wine. The way her eyes lingered on me a little too long when I laughed. After we'd eaten, she put on some music, soft, slow, intimate. We carried our glasses of wine to the couch, sitting close enough that our thighs touched. Neither of us moved away. You're different from what I expected, she said suddenly, her voice low. How so? I asked, my heart thudding in my chest. Her gaze dropped briefly to my lips before meeting my eyes again. You feel real. Like you don't even realize how captivating you are. Heat rushed to my face. I opened my mouth to reply, but the words tangled on my tongue. All I could do was hold her gaze, my breath shallow, my body aching with an electricity I couldn't ignore anymore. The silence stretched, heavy and charged. Then, slowly, deliberately, she reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Her fingers lingered against my skin, and I shivered. I didn't think. I just moved. 1 second I was frozen, and the next I was leaning in, closing the distance that had been taunting us for weeks. Our lips brushed, tentative at first. A question. My pulse pounded as I waited for her to pull away. But instead, she pressed closer, deepening the kiss with a hunger that matched my own. The world fell away. There was only her, the taste of wine on her lips, the warmth of her hand sliding against the back of my neck, the soft sigh that escaped her when I parted my lips for her. When we finally pulled back, breathless, she rested her forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the first time I met you," she whispered. My chest tightened, and I laughed softly, almost in disbelief. Me too. And in that moment, everything I'd been afraid of, every doubt, every hesitation, melted away. Because I knew. I was falling for her. After that first kiss, everything felt different. The next few days were a blur of stolen glances and playful texts, each one charged with an undercurrent of something new. It was like we'd stepped across an invisible line, and though neither of us said it out loud, we both knew there was no going back. When she invited me over again the following weekend, my nerves buzzed with anticipation. This time, there was no pretense of too much pasta or a casual hangout. I knew what I was walking into, and I think she did too. Her apartment was dimly lit when I arrived, candles flickering on the coffee table, casting warm shadows across the room. Music hummed softly in the background, slower, more intimate than before. She opened the door with a smile that made my stomach flip, and, before I could even set my bag down, she pulled me into her arms. The kiss was immediate, urgent. There was no hesitation now, no careful testing of boundaries. Her lips moved against mine like she'd been starving for the taste, and I realized I had too. My hands slid around her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between us. We stumbled back toward the couch, laughing breathlessly as we fell onto the cushions together. Her laughter melted into a sigh when my fingers traced the curve of her jaw, then tangled in her hair. She kissed me deeper, her hand skimming down my side, sending sparks racing across my skin. I'd never felt this way before, not with anyone. Every touch was amplified, every brush of her lips against mine a promise of something bigger, something I couldn't quite name but desperately wanted. When she finally pulled back, her eyes searched mine, her chest rising and falling with quick breaths. "Tell me if this is too much," she whispered, her voice husky, almost pleading. I shook my head, my lips curving into a smile. "It's not. I want this." Her answering smile was soft, but full of heat. She leaned in again, her kisses slower this time, savoring, exploring. Her fingers traced patterns over my arm, my hip, as if memorizing me piece by piece. I mirrored her touch, emboldened by the way she shivered under my hands. Time blurred. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only us, two women tangled together, learning the language of each other's bodies through every sigh, every touch, every breathless kiss. Eventually, we lay tangled on the couch, the candles burning low. Her head rested against my shoulder, and I traced lazy circles on her back. The air between us was quiet but full, heavy with the sweetness of something real. I should have been scared. This was uncharted territory for me. But instead of fear, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Like I'd finally found the place I was meant to be. The morning after that night on her couch, I woke to find Arya still asleep beside me, her hair a messy halo against the pillow, her lips curved in the faintest smile. The sight made my chest ache in a way I hadn't felt before. It was gentle but powerful, like something inside me was unlocking. When she stirred, her eyes fluttered open, and she gave me a sleepy grin. "You're still here," she whispered. "Of course I am," I murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It should have felt strange, unfamiliar territory, crossing lines I had never dared before. But instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We spent the day wrapped in that soft cocoon of newness, cooking breakfast together, laughing over burnt toast, moving around her kitchen like we'd done it 100 times before. Yet beneath the laughter, there was a current of something heavier. At one point, as we sat at her tiny table sipping coffee, she grew quiet. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug, her gaze fixed somewhere far away. "What are you thinking about?" I asked softly. She hesitated, then looked up at me. "You scare me." The words hit me like a jolt. "What?" "Why?" "Because I didn't expect this," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "I didn't expect you. And now I don't know how not to want more." Her vulnerability cracked something open in me. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "You're not the only one," I admitted. My throat tightened, but I pushed through. "I've been telling myself I know who I am, what I want. But then you came along, and suddenly nothing makes sense anymore, except you." Her eyes softened, filling with something that looked a lot like relief. She squeezed my hand, her thumb brushing my skin. "So, we're both terrified?" I laughed, a shaky sound. "Completely." That moment changed everything. We weren't just two people caught up in the heat of passion anymore. We were admitting the truth, laying ourselves bare in a way I'd never done before. It was raw, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. The rest of the day, we moved slower. Every kiss felt different, deeper, threaded with meaning. Every touch lingered, less about desire and more about connection. When she curled into me on the couch later, her head resting against my chest, I realized I didn't just want her body, I wanted her. Her laughter, her honesty, her messy, beautiful soul. And as much as it scared me, I also knew something else with absolute certainty. I was already in too deep to turn back. For a while, it felt like we were living in a dream. Every moment with Arya was filled with warmth and laughter, the kind of quiet joy I hadn't known I was missing. But reality has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. It started small. A friend spotted us together one evening at a bookstore, our hands brushing as we leaned over the same table of new releases. "You two are cute," she teased with a wink. I laughed it off, but my stomach tightened. Later, as we walked home, I pulled my hand away too quickly when someone passed by. Arya noticed. She didn't say anything right away, but the silence between us grew heavy. By the time we reached my apartment, she finally asked, "Are you ashamed of this?" "Of me?" Her voice wasn't angry, just quiet, almost fragile. The question pierced straight through me. "No," I said quickly, shaking my head. "God, no. I'm just scared." She studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. "Scared of what?" I struggled to find the words. "Of what people will think. Of what it means." My voice cracked, and I forced a breath. I've never felt this way about a woman before. And if I admit it out loud, it's real. It changes everything. Her expression softened, but there was hurt there too. She stepped closer, placing her hand gently against my cheek. "It doesn't change us. We're already real. Whatever anyone else thinks, it doesn't touch this." I leaned into her touch, my chest aching. "I know. I don't know how to be brave the way you are." She gave me a small, sad smile. "I'm not always brave either. I've been hurt before. I know how people can be. But I also know that hiding doesn't protect us. It just makes us smaller." Her words lingered long after she left that night. I lay awake replaying them, torn between fear and the undeniable pull of what we had. Loving her felt so right, so natural. But the idea of stepping into the world together, of naming what we were, it terrified me. The next few days were tense. We still talked, still saw each other, but there was a shadow now. A hesitation. I hated the thought that I might be the one dimming her light, the one holding us back. And yet, every time I saw her smile, every time she reached for my hand, I knew I couldn't walk away. The question wasn't whether I loved her. I already did. The question was whether I was brave enough to love her out loud. The tension lingered between us for days, an invisible wall we both pretended not to notice. But I felt it in every glance, every silence that stretched too long, every moment when I almost reached for her hand and then pulled back. One evening, I found myself standing outside her apartment with my heart pounding. I hadn't told her I was coming, I just couldn't stand another night of pretending everything was fine. When she opened the door, surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a quiet smile. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." I swallowed hard, searching for words. "Can we talk?" She nodded, stepping aside to let me in. We sat on the couch, the same one where everything between us had begun. For a moment, I just stared at my hands, twisting them in my lap, before finally blurting out the truth. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I've been pulling back because I'm scared. Scared of what this means, scared of what people will think, scared of admitting how much my voice broke, but I pushed through. How much I love you." Her eyes widened slightly, and then softened. "You love me." The words hung in the air, terrifying and liberating all at once. I met her gaze, my chest tightening. "Yes, I do. I never expected to, but I do. And I don't want to keep hiding it, or you or us. Not anymore." For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then she leaned forward, cupping my face in her hands, her forehead pressing against mine. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I closed the distance, kissing her with all the fear, longing, and love I had been carrying. This time, there was no hesitation, no holding back, just us raw and unguarded. Her hands slid around me, pulling me closer, and I melted into her, every piece of me finally letting go. The kiss deepened, slow and tender, before turning urgent, desperate. Weeks of tension unraveled in that moment, replaced by a certainty that filled every inch of me. Later, as we lay tangled in each other's arms, her head resting against my chest, I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. The world outside still existed with its opinions, its judgments, its noise, but here, in her arms, none of it mattered. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who lived a life she thought she was supposed to, who buried her feelings before they could grow. That girl had been safe, yes, but she'd never really lived. Now, I was living. Loving. I pressed a kiss to the top of Aria's head, my arms tightening around her. "I never expected to fall for you," I whispered into the quiet. She smiled against my skin. "Sometimes the best things are the ones we never expect." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a story of falling. It was the beginning of everything.